Why don't they just tell us? Why can't people like David Grusch, Lue Elizondo, the Inspector General of Intelligence, or anyone who works or has seen firsthand crash recoveries, reverse engineering programs, or non-human biologics, why don't they just come out and tell us what they know? Because if what Dave and Lou are alleging is true, isn't there justification that it's in the best interests of society and our entire species to share this information publicly? Even if those in the know did want to share the greatest secret in human history with the rest of the world, to be in such a position, at least here in the US, a person would very most likely hold a security clearance and subsequently be sworn to a non-disclosure agreement of secrecy about what they know. If you signed an NDA because it's required to attain your clearance and knew that one single violation could mean being put to death or imprisoned for life or have any property you own seized, all without potentially having it decided on by a jury of your peers, would you break that oath? It's long been the status quo that our governments tell us what we are allowed to know as citizens. During the mid-20th century, in the early days of the Cold War, the terrifying reality of nuclear war and the weapons that have the capacity to literally rain hell down upon the planet were deemed to be of the highest national security secrets. To preserve our national security and protect those secrets, the government and the newly created intelligence apparatus had to come up with ways to keep us safe. The best way to do that was to enact strict information control through program classifications and tiered security clearances for individuals within the system who would be allowed or read in to those programs or pieces of information. But the consideration of what may be potentially harmful to national security or national interest and thus be classified, and who's subsequently cleared to access those secrets, is at its core a personal judgment call, which, by the way, is a judgment call made by a human and therefore has the potential to be flawed, at least from time to time. The rationale used by these humans to make these judgments to classify something doesn't have to be justified unless it's challenged in court. These agencies creating these classifications aren't incorruptible. They can and will and do classify information and material, not just to protect national security, but to also hide mistakes that have been made by an agency or to hide illegal activity or simply for political preference reasons. But what these overactive and widespread classifications do in the long run is insulate those holding the power of classification and further distance us, the citizens, more importantly, congressional oversight. So what happens is you have a runaway security state with less and less visibility on it with each passing year, and makes it nearly impossible to try and understand where or how to course correct on the topics being classified into oblivion. And this, of course, includes the UFO topic. And we're going to dig into all this in detail, but the insidious implications, as we're about to see, is that we have a system ran by largely unknown, unelected officials with nearly 20 different intelligence agencies that have the power, through rampant overclassification of information, to literally steer the course of the country by controlling what information is or isn't shared. And what is shared is very tightly controlled and, unfortunately, often blindly accepted by Congress and the executive branch because they are told that the rest of it might affect our national interest securities someday and must remain behind a veil of secrecy. The reality is there is an alarming amount of classified information behind these walls of secrecy, and unless there are catastrophic releases from the inside the apparatus, like with the Pentagon papers released by Daniel Ellsberg, or outlaw whistleblowers of the Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, and Gary McKinnon ilk, much of this information will never see the light of day publicly. Just remember, as we go through this episode, the name of the game here is information control. Because if you can control the information, you can control the people. If members of the security apparatus could, with impunity, keep from those elected by the people that which they're entitled to know, or worse, feed false information, Those who could control the classified data could be the real decision makers. Harold H. Green. Now, I do understand that nations need to have the ability to classify and protect secrets to maintain national security, but the problem becomes in defining the line between the information control for security reasons and endemic secrecy for personal, political, or power hoarding reasons. And without proper oversight, how are we supposed to know the difference? And with the UFO phenomenon, the tiny few individuals who know and control the bigoted, deep black, unacknowledged information have decided that the UFO NHI reality and the information around it is simply too important to allow the mass general public to know about it. As I've said before, I call BS on that as treasonous censorship, because the rampant overclassification and overuse of the secrecy stamp has significantly affected the ability for us, the public, and apparently even our elected officials, to properly engage in so many important topics that greatly affect us all. Here's a current list of organizations and agencies with classification power. Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, the FBI, National Reconnaissance Office, National Geospatial Agency, Defense Intelligence Agency, Bureau of Intelligence and Research of the State Department, intelligence agencies of the 5 main military branches, including Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, and that's actually 6 if you count the Coast Guard, and intelligence elements for the Drug Enforcement Agency, Department of Energy, Department of Treasury, Department of Homeland Security. And by original design, all of these agencies are supposed to be under the oversight of Congress. Sadly, the reality is, as we've seen in recent congressional hearings in 2023 and 2024, that oversight is practically non-existent. Altogether, these agencies are averaging around 250 to 300,000 classification decisions per day. And a decision could be stamping something classified, or extending a classification, or changing its status, or creating a derivative classification. So to be clear, it's not just 250 to 300,000 things are becoming classified every day. That's the total number of decisions within the system. At that crazy pace of classification decisions, information is being classified and buried faster than it can even be reviewed for declassification. Because again, unless there's a legal challenge, a classification decision will stand. Roll this all in with the single most guarded secret in history, UFOs, and the presence of a non-human intelligence that's interacting with our planet and our species. It's no wonder attempting to gain access to any information is impossible, because it's been buried and reburied in an ever-expanding web of overlapping, insane number of classifications that make it impossible to ever find anything if you don't know exactly where to look. Congressman Andy Ogle's statement after the closed-door SCIF briefing on January 12, 2024.
I just think what most of the American people fear is true, is that the government, there's a concerted effort to conceal as much information as possible, both from Congress and to the general public. So I asked very specific questions and was unable to get specific answers. And so that's a problem, and we're not going to stop until we get the truth.
Let's be clear, we are never going to get a straight answer on this from the gatekeepers, at least not until Congress can figure out a way to legally compel those who may know the truth, or at least pieces of the truth, to come forward. And to Representative Ogle's point, another problem is how fractured and compartmentalized this information can be.
Well, I think what you see is a very compartmentalized effort. So by compartmentalizing the information to such a degree that if you don't ask the specific question to the specific person that has that piece of information, so we could take a puzzle with 100 pieces and disseminate it to 47 people. So unless you ask the right person for the right piece of the puzzle, you're not going to get an answer, and that's what's happened here.
There are likely hundreds or even thousands who've worked on parts of these UFO programs, but they would only know a tiny sliver of the whole picture, and it's all designed to be that way on purpose, because this is the most highly guarded secret ever, classified higher even than the atomic and nuclear programs, above the space exploration programs of the US, Russia, China, any of the Five Eye nations, above any cutting-edge secret program anywhere in the world. The UFO NHI phenomenon reality is the whole enchilada. It is the greatest story and secret in human history, period. They don't want this secret to be found, and if it is, they want it to be such a cluster F to untangle it that even if you could, it would be essentially impossible to trace back to those original gatekeepers who've concealed the secret for so long. Okay, so enough about the ridiculous redundancy and absurdity of our classification and secrecy creation. Let's talk about what classifications are and who does get to see the information, programs, or tech and be read in on the juicy stuff. Okay, so first, despite what many people believe, there are only 3 main clearance levels that an individual can be granted from the government. They are confidential, secret, and top secret / sensitive compartmented information with polygraph tests. I say main levels because other clearances can exist from other agencies. For example, Customs and Border Patrol have their own CPB investigation or a public trust type investigation, but confidential, secret, top secret, sensitive compartmented information with a polygraph are the 3 main levels. And let's dispel some myths while we're here, because it's important to understand what is real life and what is fiction when it comes to all this stuff. There is no Q clearance, no majestic level clearance, no black or special access or unacknowledged clearance within the clearance hierarchy itself. Top secret, sensitive compartmented information with a polygraph is as high as it goes. What about the level designations of access, like the need to know, that can restrict a person, even a very high-ranking government official who isn't read in on a certain program? Yes, those are there, but they aren't fundamentally higher levels of clearance classification. They're essentially a team sheet of who's in and who's out of the team working on that project or program. But each of those team members only hold the TS SCI plus polygraph level clearance. And we'll get into these deeper restrictions here in a bit. So let's say you're trying to apply for a UFO reverse engineering job. How does one go about gaining a TS SCI or any clearance? It's actually relatively simple. You would only need a sponsor to recommend the clearance and pay for the very lengthy approval process. Obviously, this is typically a government or corporate entity or government contractor, and it begins with the SF-86 application document that I'll link below. The approval process is specifically created to be thorough in vetting that an applicant is willing and able to state officially their loyalty to the U.S. The form, which is very long and a pain in the ass to fill out, states the application purpose. Quote, background investigations for national security positions are conducted to gather information to determine whether you are reliable, trustworthy, of good conduct and character, and loyal to the United States. Essentially, you're going to open up everything about yourself willingly, and I do mean literally everything. Applicants are expected to disclose all past employers, all places of residence from the past 10 years, any foreign travel, any foreign relationships, any foreign contacts or foreign relatives, all business dealings, and all financial or personal status with any of the listed contacts, acquaintances, or friends that could be relevant to the national security interest of the United States. And within each of these sections of the application, you're required to outline everything you know in very, very specific detail. Have you ever been fired? Better list it and explain why. Ever been written up for anything at a job? They want those details. Ever had any psychological or emotional health issues? They want the why, how, when, and where were you diagnosed or referred. Ever broke up with an ex? Ever been divorced? You will need to list them all and explain why you split up or divorced. Ever been arrested or convicted of a crime? Bankruptcy? Gambling problem? Late on taxes? You will list it. Ever been late on a credit card payment? Yep, they want that too. How about this one? In the last 7 years, have you ever injected, snorted, inhaled, swallowed, experimented with, or otherwise consumed any drug or controlled substance? Ever had an issue with alcohol affecting your life in any way at all? You're required to spill the beans on all this information. And they are not messing around either, because you will fill in your social security number at the bottom of every page of the application just to make sure you're paying attention. And this application runs well over 130 pages long. It's basically the longest, most thorough application and background check that you'll ever fill out in your life. The SF-86 application is then followed by an interview to confirm every detail and hammer out any inconsistencies or discrepancies that may turn up when they are reviewing your file. And if you thought no one would find out about some small detail or a drug you might have taken back in college that one time, you'll lastly be required to take a polygraph test to confirm all the details and facts on your application and the interview to make doubly sure it's watertight, accurate, and legitimate. Holy sh! Once you've jumped through all these hoops and you survive the vetting, you're then miraculously approved for the clearance, where you will be entered into a government monitoring database, the Joint Personnel Adjudication System, also known as JPAS. Which is designed to maintain records and raise any red flags. And a red flag can be anything that updates the information on your application in any specific trajectory, like a new home purchase, sudden and large amounts of new consumer debt, or major influxes of capital wealth. Basically, the red flag warnings are there to be alerted to any possible positive or negative outside manipulation by malicious actors. And you can also be flagged for any erratic behaviors like being arrested, psychotic episodes, or anything that could signal your mental stability or decision-making may have been compromised, all of which could be cause for having your clearance revoked. Clearances are ultimately granted and maintained by the formerly known DoD's Central Adjudicative Facility, which has recently been renamed to the DCSA, Consolidated Adjudication Services, CAS. This is actually the agency that we saw Grusch have some issues with during his attempts to testify before Congress in July of 2023, and are responsible for clearance, investigations, approvals, and any possible withdrawals. Needless to say, they swing a big stick. Now, once granted, a personal clearance generally lasts for about 10 years, after which an updated SF-86 will need to be resubmitted for clearance renewal. And that's got to be a really fun 10-year anniversary present. Thanks, Uncle Sam. And if you're lucky enough to procure a TS-CSI with polygraph clearance, it then all comes down to your individual technical and professional experience to determine which contracts, programs, and projects that you'll be offered to work on or be recruited into. Okay, so let's get back to what about the pesky need to know access gatekeeping? This is actually the key component which becomes the truly limiting factor. A need to know access list creates a defined roster of cleared individuals who are allowed access to a program and its facilities and materiel, also called an approved bigot list. And if you're not on this list, you are not getting access, no matter who you are. Just ask Admiral Wilson, as he lamented to Dr. Eric Davis in the infamous Wilson-Davis memo. Basically, Admiral Wilson, who was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency at the time, wanted to know what the need-to-know criteria was that pertained to the UFO UAP programs, and even he was denied. All he could find out is that a deal was struck between the defense contractors and Pentagon SAPOC, Special Access Program Oversight Committee, that the contractors, not the government, had the right to delineate who could be granted access regardless of their clearance level or U.S. government position that they held. So basically what happened is we had some Pentagon stooge who signed over our country's most coveted program to the whims of the defense industry contractors. How much you want to bet there was a greased handshake on that effing deal? As Admiral Wilson states in the interaction with Davis, what this all means is these programs and contractors are operating without any official oversight or any justification of their project spending. And we, you and I, are footing the blind bill for this every year. And there's nothing we or anyone we put in office can do anything about it. This should concern and really piss off all American citizens. Your money, my money, our money is being used in ways that we aren't allowed to know about or oversee to make sure that the money is indeed being spent on what is best for our national security and prosperity interests, and not just those of the defense industry. Because right now, we're basically all paying blindly to help advantage the warmonger military-industrial complex machine that is hell-bent on causing, creating, and funding every major war on the planet. F that. But I digress. So let's say you're in consideration, either known to you or not, to be hired on a sensitive project that has a need-to-know access requirement. If your technical and professional expertise is sufficient and you are recruited or hired onto such a program, at that point of being hired, the need-to-know criteria has been established, and you would then be officially donned with a security indoctrination, aka read in, and thus placed on the approved person bigot list. The need-to-know allowance of the bigot list is what grants access to a program, or at least the specific compartmented information and materials necessary to perform your specific duties within said program that you've been hired to complete. And then, hopefully, this is when they take you into the hangar with the UFOs or the deep freezer vault with the non-human biologics. Despite the exhaustive application process, this security clearance apparatus is a relatively simple yet effective system designed to produce extensively vetted and trusted individuals that have personal access to sensitive materials or programs. What's important to know is that these same classification levels of confidential, secret, and top secret SCI are also applied to any documents or materiel associated with the projects deemed capable of damaging national security if it was itself released to the public. Document classification occurs on a specific date or event and is marked or is supposed to be marked for declassification 10 years from the date of original decision. However, according to Executive Order 13526, if the original classification authority, OCA, determines that the sensitivity of the classified information, document, or material is of higher concern or sensitivity for national security reasons, information or documents won't be marked for declassification for up to 25 years from the original date of decision. Now, before any documentation can be released and available to the public from a security clearance protected program, like through a FOIA request, documentation must first undergo a process known as derivative classification, where any sensitive info can be redacted or paraphrased, and the new document that is produced can be stepped down on the hierarchy of classification and does not automatically mean that the material can be released publicly. Public access must still be approved. This process is known as the Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review, DOPSR. This process is the one that David Grusch often refers to when discussing previously classified material or program information and why he can't reveal certain information that hasn't been cleared from DOPSR. And to the frustration of many of us hungry for more details of what he knows, he is extremely methodical when drawing lines in the sand on what he will and won't share. Luckily, he has been absolutely razor sharp to not cross those DOPSR-approved lines drawn in the sand. And although it's a process that moves like pond water and laborious as it is, him doing it the right way and not violating his agreements is also why he's such a thorn in the side of the gatekeepers at that five-sided puzzle palace, the Pentagon. Bravo Zulu, Mr. Grusch. Cleared personnel with a need to know may only view or utilize classified information and materials inside of an approved secret compartmented information facility. It used to be a pretty obscure term, but SCIF has gotten a fair amount of attention in recent years, largely thanks to the under oath congressional testimonies of several high-profile patriots like David Grusch and David Fravor and Lieutenant Ryan Graves in July of 2023. When Grusch specifically was asked questions by members of Congress at the hearing about the existence of UFO reverse engineering programs, facility locations, biologics, and other sharp questions from the bipartisan members, Grusch repeatedly said he was limited in what he could answer publicly, not because he wanted to elude, but because of the limitations from DOBSR of what he was cleared to discuss publicly. Several of the more poignant questions were answered with preface that more details could be available inside a SCIF. Now, a SCIF itself is simply an area or facility that has been approved and prepared to have highly classified information or activities discussed or taken place in it. They can be anywhere that has been officially designated as a SCIF and varies from something as small as a single room or an office, like for a small congressional briefing, or an entire floor of a building, like where Lockheed does reverse engineering and anti-gravity research, or an entire building, base, or facility in and of itself, like the vast underground UFO hangars at Wright-Patterson AFB. Now, SCIFs can be operated by the government or set up by contractors as long as they adhere to the specifications outlined in the National Industrial Security Program Operating Manual, NISPOM. You government hooligans love your kooky acronyms. The National Industrial Security Program Operating Manual, or NISPOM, the purpose is to, quote, establish requirements for the protection of classified information disclosed to or developed by contractors, licensees, grantees, or certificate holders to prevent unauthorized disclosure. Essentially, this is a legally binding contract with the federal government specifying how to maintain operational security while handling classified materials and documents. A large bulk of this extremely dry piece of legal government literature linked below is defining how the systems can and cannot operate, like not being able to bring cell phones or other digital recording devices into a SCIF. The NIPSOM agreement allows any contracting government agency, which could be any various government entity, to release information and materials to the cleared contractor for approved use within their SCIF. Before entry or working inside a SCIF, personnel must sign the SF-312 document, which is essentially a government NDA. That agreement, by the way, is definitely the most terrifying piece of this whole puzzle, and we're going to unpack that here in a bit. The SF-312 is what the whistleblower protections are also geared towards allowing people to break without fear of reprisal. As you can imagine, many redundant steps are usually taken to ensure that no one and nothing makes it in or out of a SCIF without proper authorization. Here are some of the general rules of operating within a SCIF. Any approved visitors must be accompanied by the facility security officer, have a proper clearance level, and a need-to-know approval if required. SCIFs are subject to unannounced audits by controlling authorities at any time. Personnel are also subject to search at any time inside the SCIF. Any uncleared visitor, like building maintenance, pest control, janitor, all must be accompanied and eyes are on them at all times. If others are working in the vicinity of the visitor, all workstations must be locked for the duration of the time that the person or persons are present, and any sensitive material must be placed within a safe, which would probably be a good time to take your lunch break. Open and closing checklists must be followed strictly, and logs maintained to ensure a record of proper SCIF policies. The SCIF must be fully shut down and secured when not occupied by personnel. No cleared external drives or workstations may be left unattended while you are inside the SCIF. So, like if you go on a snack break or bathroom break, you must procedurally lock up your workstation. No uncleared devices with USB, Bluetooth, cameras, microphones, digital storage, or transmission capabilities are allowed inside. So you'll drop your phone at the door. Networks inside the area are closed, meaning no outside internet connection, although some facilities are cleared for a switch, which will allow a workstation to jump from a closed, secured network to an open network. You're not to discuss anything pertaining to your project outside of your SCIF. So no water cooler talk or break room project chatter. All add up to an extremely elevated level of operation security inside a SCIF and a very slick system of keeping the US government's technical and sensitive information under a tight lock and key, and hopefully, in the eyes of the gatekeepers, in trusted hands. All right, now we're getting to the juicy stuff. Special access programs, or SAPs, are the very top of the top most guarded programs in the nation. SAPs stem from the World War II era special operations and the days of the infamous black programs in the 60s. While they have substantial mystique around them, SAPs are actually designated into 3 categories based on their content and objectives: acquisition, intelligence, operations, and support. Acquisition is the category of SAPs that were established to protect sensitive research, development, and procurement activities. These may involve the purchase or development of weapon systems or military technology. Acquisition is the most common SAP category, making up about 75 to 80% of all SAPs. Intelligence category SAPs were established primarily to protect the planning and execution of especially sensitive counterintelligence operations or collection activities. And operations and support SAPs were established to protect the planning for, execution of, and support to especially sensitive military operations. Special access programs are now labeled as either acknowledged or unacknowledged. And within the unacknowledged description, there is also waived unacknowledged SAPs. Acknowledged SAPs are acknowledged, affirmed, or made known to others. That is, it may be openly recognized or publicly acknowledged, and the purpose of the program is identified openly. Unacknowledged SAPs utilize enhanced security measures to ensure that the existence of the program is not acknowledged, affirmed, or made known to any person not authorized for such information. Funding is strictly unacknowledged, classified, or not directly linked to the program. This gives a unique ability for an unacknowledged SAP to have the paper trail of their funding hidden from the public and Congress, which should have the power of the purse within the federal government to control or gain access to these programs, but they do not. Taking this a step further, waived unacknowledged SAPs, or WU SAPs, removes the reporting requirements to the undersecretaries. This means a waived unacknowledged SAP has zero oversight or accountability by Congress, and thus we the people. So essentially, we take these program officials at their word that everything is being spent how it should, researched how it should, and doing the most good for our country, which to me sounds like the ultimate trust me bro tactic. This is also where I scratch my head and wonder, like, how the F are these legal? I can almost guarantee you the founding fathers of the United States would not have let programs like this to come into existence and are probably rolling over in their graves. The DoD explicitly states that the main objective of SAPs are to safeguard U.S. national security, but there's also no denying that they are without a doubt the perfect place to hide any advanced projects, technologies, UFO reverse engineering or crash retrieval programs, anti-gravitic breakthroughs, and all while enabling program directors to cover up any significant advancements and spending records along the way. Gee, and you wonder why the Pentagon fails their audit every single year? Shocker. The ICIG's investigation of waived unacknowledged SAPs, as reported by David Grusch and others, has further confirmed that this is the most likely place to find evidence of UAPs within the fractured compartmentalization of the intelligence sector of the U.S. government or contractor projects. With SAPs, SCIFs, controlled access bigot list, watertight signed government NDAs, and program, document, and information classifications, as well as clearance requirements for individuals who have a tightly controlled range of access where illegal working budgets can be legally hidden, the United States intelligence apparatus has built out an incredibly effective system for compartmentalizing and protecting any information or secrets under the guise of protecting national security and national interests. And it's not hard to see how a secret even as large as the existence of UFOs or recovery and reverse engineering programs or anything related to them could be easily hidden within such a convoluted system. Currently, we are losing this battle, but with more awareness by more citizens, we can help push our elected officials for the changes that will protect those who may be buried deep within these programs and wanting to shine a light in the dark corners of classified information, programs, and realities. Because despite what the debunkers and those too impatient to dig for facts The travesty of what's been lost to this point by the human race from these deceptions is creating significant cracks from within this archaic system, and people in the know are trying to come forward. But even so, as we're about to see, it could come at the cost of their life. If you follow the debate closely about whether or not UFOs and the phenomena that creates them and controls them is real, you'll be very familiar with the start of whistleblowers that we've been discussing so far. You'll likely also be very familiar with the criticism and frustration of many, or even thought to yourself, why don't they just come out and tell the world what you know? Well, frankly, because they can't. People like Lue and Dave, who are bound by their clearance restrictions, have what sounds to me essentially signed their rights away with one pen stroke on the frightening SF-312 document, which is classified information non-disclosure agreement with the US government. And by the way, is required to sign if you want to apply or be granted a clearance and thus work on secret or deep classified projects or information. Nice little catch-22 gotcha there by the US government, by the way, forcing people to sign away their rights and swear to secrecy before they may even know the depth of what they're about to delve into. Stay classy, America. But in all seriousness, it's not an overstatement to say that the punishment for violating these NDAs is downright terrifying. Once you read through the chapters and provisions of enforcement, you begin to understand why everyone keeps their mouth shut. The SF-312 NDA lists and is empowered by various executive orders and intelligence agency acts, and directly mentions specific chapters and sections of Title 18 of the U.S. Criminal Code. It's actually these chapters and subsection provisions that we need to really understand to grasp why the SF-312 NDA is so powerful. First, we need to know that there are three main chapters referenced from Title 18. Chapter 31, which covers embezzlement and theft. Chapter 37, espionage and censorship. And Chapter 93, public officers and employees. Starting with Section 641 of Chapter 31, discussing embezzlement and theft, these can range anywhere from $1,000 in a year in jail per offense up to $25,000 and 5 years in jail per offense. The truly terrifying how the hell is that legal stuff is found in Chapter 37. Section 793 of Chapter 37 is about gathering, copying, replicating in any way classified information. You could face up to a $50,000 fine and 10 years in jail per offense. Section 798 of Chapter 37 is about simply talking to anyone about information who then themselves is not cleared to hear that information, which leaves the most terrifying part of all. Chapter 37, Section 794. Section 794 is definitely the meat and potatoes of the we aren't effing around, don't violate this NDA deterrent. 794, Section A, whoever, with intent or reason, to believe that it will be used to injure the United States or to the advantage of a foreign nation, information related to national defense, shall be punished by death or by imprisonment for any term of years or for life. Okay, pause. This is an actual death penalty clause written right into this agreement. Or at the very least, you could be locked up for any undetermined amount of years or for life. Good Lord. Wait, it gets better. It goes on to say that the sentence of death shall not be imposed unless the jury, or if there is no jury, pause here again. Did you hear that? If there is no jury. So this is blatantly saying in black and white that you are not guaranteed or have the right to a jury trial. Wow. Continuing. So if there is no jury, the court further finds that the offense resulted in the identification by a foreign power of an individual acting as an agent of the United States and consequently in the death of that individual. Basically, if you're ousted as an agent and killed, it's justified for the crime. But then there's Section 794 Provision B that states whoever, in time of war, with intent that the same as the provision above, shall be communicated to the enemy, shall be punished by death or by imprisonment for any term of years or for life. So that's death threat number 2 in the same clause. And you wonder why people who are under these NDAs are terrified to just come out with it and tell us what you know, bro. Because if they do it in the wrong way to the wrong person, they could literally be sentenced to death. And that may happen without their case even being heard by a jury of peers. So here's what you do. If you ever hear people bitching online or anywhere about why doesn't Grusch or Elizondo or Karl Nell or Chris Mellon or anybody who is operating under security clearance doesn't just come out and tell us everything they know, send them this video so they can try to wrap their impatient little minds around the severity and seriousness of what it actually means to commit that violation. Oh, and as with all these offenses, if this happens in or on the premises of personal property, the government can fully legally come in and seize any property if they determine that it was used to facilitate the sharing or acquisition of classified information. So let's just paint a little picture here to drive home Section 794 all the way home. Let's say I'm buddies with David Grusch, and he has my wife and I over for dinner one night at his house. This is all just hypothetical, by the way. I don't know Mr. Grusch, but thank you for your service, Dave, if you ever see this. So in this example, we're hanging out. Let's say we have a glass of wine with dinner. Dave starts getting loose lips. Let's say he tells me some classified information about defense secrets related to UFOs that I'm not cleared to know about. If he owns the house that it happened in, it could be seized simply because it was used in the facilitation of the dissemination of classified information. Taking this example a step further, and again, to clarify for anyone or any agency watching, this is all hypothetical. I didn't have dinner with Dave, and I don't have any friends or family in foreign nations considered to be adversaries of the United States. But for example's sake, let's say I did. Let's say I had a cousin in Russia, and I ended up telling this cousin about what Dave had told me about this classified national defense related information at the house that night. Dave and I technically would now be on the hook for disseminating classified defense information. Because Dave has a clearance and thus has signed the NDA document SF-312, if prosecutors could show this as harmful to the United States, Dave could be facing the death penalty or life in prison. Now, if that doesn't scare the shit out of you and make your butt pucker at the thought of simply saying the wrong thing to the wrong person in the wrong environment, then you're a stone cold statue of steel. But as you can imagine, most sane people working under this agreement are rightfully fearful and more likely just downright terrified to break this NDA, and why it's so powerful in its ability to muzzle those who could potentially break the dams of catastrophic disclosure wide open to the world. This final important segment is referenced from the book UAPs and the Nuclear Puzzle by Robert Salas, U.S. Air Force Captain Retired, Nuclear Missile Crew Commander. So hopefully you can see why we're getting nowhere fast, attempting to get answers from the U.S. intelligence classification system about anything really, much less the really interesting stuff like the UFO reality. And of course, those under clearance NDAs are also rightly terrified of the exorbitant legal penalties or even a damn death penalty for disclosing classified information in the wrong way. With power derived from the preamble to the Constitution, the United States government has the ability and power to withhold information from the public. In all their foresight and early wisdom, unfortunately, the founding fathers of the Constitution didn't foresee the mess we're currently in, and thus couldn't say how much secrecy is needed or if excessive secrecy could be bad for our democracy. Spoiler alert, it's extremely bad for our democracy. And in fact, with every passing year and every election cycle, it's looking more and more like an existential threat to it. Unless you worked within this hot mess of a secrecy system, you'd likely never have heard that every year, the US President receives a report from the Information Security Oversight Office, ISOO, an agency created to ensure that the government protects and allows proper access to classified and controlled information in the name of progressing the national and public interest. In 2021, the annual report to the President found several concerning deficiencies in security programs. Here are just some of the more alarming that I noted while researching this. Number 1, the tsunami of digital information being classified daily. Remember those 250 to 300,000 decisions per day? Makes it likely that most of that information will never be reviewed for declassification. 2. There are gross inconsistencies in creating and maintaining SAPs and controlled access programs, CAPs. 3. There's little oversight of these programs and agencies to ensure proper administration and establishment of programs, leaving unanswered questions like, are these programs even necessary? Is the classification rationale coherent and actually helpful to national security? Currently, we don't have any oversight to answer these questions. 4. There's an urgent need to update the primary national security authorities, offices, and individuals who have the authority to classify information that govern the Classified National Security Information (CNSI) system. 5. ISOO was unable to identify the number of derivative classification actions, which remember is the classifications created within other classified environments. Think of this as like bubbles of classifications within bubbles of classifications, or programs within programs, meaning secrets within secrets. ICE reported they were unable to find this information because of the varied approaches that the agencies use. 6. The DoD is responsible for 73.5% of the 2,116 total security classification guides, SCG, used by federal agencies. 7. It took ISOO 2 years to review just 130 of these DoD security classification guides. That leaves 1,986 of them that haven't been reviewed but are being used every day to classify information. 8. In 16 of these security classification guides that include exemptions to the automatic declassification at 25 years, the OCA responsible for the SCG does not have the authority to apply an exemption, meaning information that should be automatically declassified after 25 years can't and won't see the light of day. 9. Deficient or inaccurate security classification guides leads to the proliferation of illegitimate classified information and enables information to be classified at the wrong level. 10. The DoD is responsible for inspecting and monitoring contractors, licensees, and grantees under the CNSI. This monitoring is called the National Industrial Security Program and is essentially the fox guarding the henhouse. There are 39 agencies across the executive branch that have classified contracts, and this program needs an overhaul as it is nearly 30 years old, and according to ISOO, it no longer supports our national security needs, meaning that it's woefully and dangerously inadequate to do what it's intended to do and protect national security. The bald-faced deficiencies in the classification system are endemic, and it has long been operating with gross inefficiencies. Deeply buried group from within such a system, like the holders of the UFO secret, or as Solace likes to call them, the UFO cabal, would be well aware of all these inefficiencies and easily use them to their advantage to maintain secrecy, obfuscate, and shuffle the cards as needed to keep anyone, including congressional oversight, hidden in deep, dark corners of layered classifications and controlled need-to-know access. I mean, they literally have a legal death threat for anyone who has signed this SF-312 NDA agreement. Roll this all up, and what we have is the ultimate system designed to create untouchable secrets. These untouchable secrets create absolute power and influence over others. Absolute power and influence corrupts absolutely. And when corruption happens, we the people lose control of the direction of our country and lose control over our elected official government that is supposed to be, but it has not been for a long time, by, for, and of the people of this nation. Secrecy around any topic, but especially the UFO and NHI reality, needs to be broken down to its fundamental parts to remove the rotten abscesses and reclaim our constitutionally granted power from these unknown, unelected individuals and contractors who've taken it upon themselves to steal and bury this greatest secret in history from all of humanity for nearly the last 90 years. This is precisely why the long-standing philosophy of the gatekeepers attempting to maintain their power by pulling the strings within the U.S. intelligence apparatus, and by extension, governments and regimes around the world, is the less the population knows, the easier they are to control. And controlling us, the people, is exactly what this is all about. Let me ask you, are you tired of being lied to, tired of the facade, confused how this is even possible, agree that this entire system desperately needs to be updated before the whole thing collapses our democracy any further? Then please consider contacting your elected officials about these problems. There are links below that you can follow to a list of every member of the House of Representatives and every member of the Senate listed by state. There are also pre-formatted letter templates that you can take and use that were written by a major U.S. university professor. Write them, call them, email them, tell them that your vote counts on them getting off their ass for this or any subject that is important to you. Trust me, I know for a fact they hear our voices. Lastly, I want to give a special shout out and credit to my friend who works under security clearance and is interested in the UFO topic that did the initial research for this episode. This was a doozy, so thank you for all your help. And if you think this information is important and should be seen by more people, then please like, share, and leave a comment below. And above all, please subscribe. It's the #1 thing you can do to help this material spread farther. And if you would like to support this channel and its mission to open as many eyes and minds as possible, then please subscribe and consider becoming a member on Patreon. Any and all support goes directly back into this project and is the best way to help increase the frequency of these episodes. And if you'd like to watch another episode on the Navy flight engineer who was stationed down in Antarctica every season for 20 years and saw some crazy stuff like huge openings going down into the ice sheet, UFOs that paced his plane, and bizarre cases of mysterious missing people, then watch the video that's linked at the end of this video and in the description below. And until next time, thank you for watching. My name is Jason. This has been Beyond Strangeness. I'll see you again soon. Take care, my friend.